But then this can bring us to animal behavior. And animal behaviors are some of our favorite things on the internet, right? There are so many GIFs of cats and dogs doing bizarre things. Here is one that I rather enjoy, where we have a goose that's attacking a family, and then the dog runs and chases away the goose. The father picks up the child. So much good animal behavior all in one tiny little GIF here. So what's this goose doing? The goose is defending its territory. It sees these other large animals coming around. It may have a nest nearby. It's got young it wants to protect. I mean, these are mammals. Mammals sometimes eat eggs. You gotta get rid of them at your territory. So the goose does this intimidation display. It tries to scare away these other animals here. Geese that protect their nests, their offspring are gonna have a higher chance of surviving to adulthood, of being born at all, as a matter of fact. And then if they're born and they survive to adulthood, they can pass on those genes. So that's something evolution will select for. Dogs are descended from wolves, and wolves live in packs. So if you are a wolf, you need to defend your pack, right? And the reason for that is your pack are very closely genetically related to you. So even if you put yourself out there and you end up dying as a result of trying to fight off dangers to your pack, the majority of your genes are still represented. There's copies of them in the other members of your pack. So that is an evolutionary advantage. That is something that natural selection would select for. Those individuals that protect things that are similar to themselves, that protect members of their pack, well, their genes are going to be passed on regardless of whether or not they manage to reproduce. So dogs maintain this behavior. They want to defend their territory. They want to defend their humans. And then fathers who pick up their child immediately when there's some sort of danger about, I think it's pretty obvious that that child probably is going to be quite well taken care of. That's another behavior evolution will select for. So we got a lot in this little GIF. What is a behavior? We should probably start with a good working definition here. A behavior is the nervous system's response to a stimuli, and the response will be carried out by either the muscular system or the hormonal system. Okay, there's a lot of big terms there. So nervous system, what do I mean by that? Any nerve tissue that you have, the nerves that you have in your arms that you use to detect things, your optic nerves, right? If you see something, right, you're going to respond to it. How are you going to respond? Well, there's going to be signals sent from those sensory nerves to your spinal column, which has a bundle of nerves in it as well. And that information can be processed by your brain, which is also made out of nerve cells. So all of that is your nervous system, whether it's a behavior you think about or it's a behavior that is just a reflex. All of that is carried out by your nervous system one way or the other. The response is carried out, is performed by your muscular system or your hormonal system. Even very, very basic responses, right? Reflexes. If something, spooks me, right? My heart starts palpitating. Well, my heart is a muscle, so that's a response being carried out by my muscular system at that point. Or maybe I'm running away from something, right? That is a response carried out by my muscular system. My muscles are helping me move. Or even if it's just something like I make a face in disgust, like that, that is my facial muscles carrying out that response. So these are all kinds of behaviors. Or your hormonal system. Well, when my heart started beating, why was that? Because adrenaline started pumping through my veins, and that caused my body to kick into the kind of fight or flight mode, right? And adrenaline is a hormone, so this is a response carried out by your hormonal system. One way or the other, behaviors will manifest in some sort of detectable way, at least to the individual that is performing them. Now, of course, that definition of behavior is kind of broad, so let's subcategorize it into a few different categories. We have innate behaviors. Innate behaviors are evolutionarily hardwired. It's something that you don't think about. It's not something you've ever learned. It's something you would do even if you had no experience with other humans. You grew up on a desert island, never exposed to anyone else your entire life, you would still have these innate behaviors. We could raise organisms in lab conditions, never expose them to the outside, they will still have these innate behaviors. So innate behaviors, they are genetically hardwired. Reflexes are a good example in humans, right? Let's say I'm in the kitchen, you know, I'm having a good time, I'm not thinking about it, and I put my hand down in order to hold my weight, and it turns out that the oven range is on, it's super hot, right? So my hand is starting to get burned. Now, before I pull my hand away, what's going to happen here? There are nerves in my hand, sensory nerves. They can feel that heat and they can feel that pain that I'm getting. So they're going to start sending electrical signals up my arms. My nervous system is now beginning to respond to that stimulus. Now those danger signals are going to travel up my arm. They haven't hit my brain yet. They're going to get to my spinal cord here. It's going to get to the spinal cord. As it turns out, for a lot of innate behaviors, that's as far as they really have to go. Not every behavior is processed in your brain. The spinal cord has the capacity to then send signals to motor nerves inside my arm, different group of nerves, but nerve tissue nonetheless, to motor nerves in my arm to say, contract, right? Pull it back up, because that's so dangerous, we don't need the brain's input to think about this. So as soon as I put my hand down on that stove, yeah, it's hot! And I don't even think about the response, but it is a fraction of a second later that my brain is actually even aware that there was a problem. There's a delay in that signal that if I had to put my hand down and my brain had to process that information, oh dear, that seems hot, and I'm starting to smell hot dogs in the air. I wonder should I remove my hand from this stove? It does seem like it's charring up pretty good. That seems bad. Yes, I think I will. I'll take my hand up from that stove. No, if organisms had to think about every single response that they had, they would die pretty fast, quite frankly, out in the wild. You need your reflexes so that you can respond to certain things before you can actually think about them. And reflexes are innate. You could take someone who's never learned what a stove is, put their hand on a stove, don't do this, and put their hand on a stove, and they will still rear their hand back because of that stimulus there, right? Another good example is a startle reflex. Sorry. So, I'm going to guess that your heart is probably palpitating right about now. I just sent you into fight or flight mode with that, and again, I apologize. But this is another kind of response. Your eyes picked up visual information, your ears picked up auditory information, both sets of sensory organs sent signals to your central nervous system that there was danger around, and before your brain could even process the information to say, hey, it's a YouTube video, there's no danger here, I'm fine, your body was already sending signals to your sympathetic nervous system to start pumping up adrenaline, start increasing blood flow to the limbs so that you could run away, start decreasing blood flow to the stomach, because we don't need to digest stuff right now. Digestion is when there's not danger around, there's spooky ghost here, right? So that is the startle reflex. It triggers that fight or flight response, and you find that in all kinds of organisms.
To make up for the startle reflex, I thought I'd show you a much cuter innate response, which is boggling. This is something that rats will do when they're very happy. Watch Sammy's eyes.
Other kinds of innate behavior, taxis. And taxis is something we're going to look at when we do the pill bug behavior lab, and I'm hoping to gather up some pill bugs and create a nice little video of that. But taxis is an innate behavior, not a reflex, but it's a directed motion towards or away from some stimulus. Sometimes you can just present organisms with a thing, and they will innately know that they either like that thing and go toward it, or they don't like that thing and they'll try to avoid it, right? Positive phototaxis is moving towards a source of light. You see these little turtles here crawling around on the beach. Well, when they are born, their mother is long gone. She left the eggs here a while ago on the beach, and she went back into the ocean. Now, those babies, if they just stand right where they are on the beach, they're going to be picked up by predators pretty easily, and they're not going to survive well. So, evolution selects for organisms who have the behavioral trait of going towards the ocean. But maybe the ocean isn't a strong enough signal for them. Maybe it's dark, they can't really see the ocean. So what can they see? They can see the moon. And generally, if you can see the moon and you go towards the moon, you're going to be heading towards the ocean for these particular sea turtles and where they breed. So they go towards that source of light, and then they end up in the ocean where they have a much higher survival chance. Those organisms that don't have that trait, that don't have the gene for that trait, for that positive phototaxis, they'll stay behind, and chances are they're going to end up getting eaten. Now, the problem with innate behaviors is they can be fooled pretty easily. So usually, through evolutionary history, the moon has been the brightest light source when these babies hatch. However, nowadays we have artificial lights, and we have headlights, and we have all kinds of other sources of light. So instead of going towards the ocean, these baby turtles are going into the street, into the roads, and things like that, and into civilization, and they're dying a lot more easily. Sometimes conservation groups will come by when these babies are about to be hatching, and they'll put up light blocks so that they will go towards the ocean and not towards human-dominated areas. So that's taxis. Taxis is directed motion, directed movement towards some stimulus. It's kind of like tropism in plants, but tropisms are directed growth responses. Taxis is directed movement responses. Fixed action patterns, another kind of innate behavior. Okay, so a fixed action pattern is a kind of ritualized series of motions. If you like, you can think about it as a series of reflexes, one after the other, after the other, after the other, wherein each reflex is the trigger for the next reflex. So it becomes this kind of ritualized pattern of behavior. In a fixed action pattern, an organism will perform a series of unlearned, they didn't need to be exposed to this, behaviors in response to some stimulus. That stimulus is referred to as a sign stimulus. Okay, so we show them something, or we give them some sort of noise, something that triggers this behavior, and they will conduct this fixed action pattern. Often mating displays are fixed action patterns. Like some birds, even when raised in captivity, still know their melodies. They still know the mating songs for their species, because that song is not a learned behavior, it's an innate behavior. It's something genetically programmed inside of them. So even if you raise them in captivity, they've never heard another bird, they will still sing the correct song for their species. A really good example of fixed action patterns, this is the classic one, this is the one that everyone uses, but it's great, is stickleback fish. So these are stickleback fish over here. Obviously these are clay models on the right hand side, but the stickleback fish over there is on the left. And that's a male stickleback fish, because the males have this kind of red beard under their chin, which is important. And stickleback fish, when one male sees another male, they begin this ritualized series of aggressive behaviors, trying to like bob and weave and intimidate the other male out of their territory. That's a fixed action pattern, this kind of territorial defensive display. And we were noticing that when we had these guys in tanks, periodically they would do this display even when other males weren't in the tank. What was going on there? Why were they doing this fixed action pattern even though there weren't any other male fish? What we eventually noticed was when they were doing it, it was because a red truck was passing by the window. And that's when we realized it's not that the other male is there. They have this fixed action pattern which responds to the sign stimulus of the color red. Evolution is like this sometimes. Sometimes mechanisms only get good enough to pass. In the evolutionary environment that stickleback fish developed in, the only time they saw the color red was when there were other males around. So having this fixed action response to a very simple stimulus, the color red, was good enough to get the job done. But then when you put them in these other environments, out of context, suddenly you start to see where these innate behaviors start looking a little bit silly. So we took these super realistic, the one at the top, these super realistic male stickleback fish clay models, and we put them in the tank. Didn't care. The males in the tank did not care about those hyper-realistic models. They were A-okay by them. But then we took these laughably crude clay models of stickleback fish and we just painted the underside red, and every single time it triggered that territorial display from the male stickleback fish. So it turned out red was close enough. Evolution doesn't get things perfect, it just gets them good enough to the point where it would be passable. So here we have a little clay model, right? Stickleback ignores this clay model, but then we take the laughably crude model, we put that in the tank instead. Here he is. And boom, right there, he goes and he rams that thing, and he does it again right afterwards, so he starts attacking it. Another good example of an innate response, mating behaviors. So, here I borrowed this from Deep Look. I hope they won't copyright strike me, but this is a great little display of Clypeatus, the jumping spider, trying to impress a female. And you can see that he has this very ritualized series of, he's throwing his hands up here like that, and he has a little song that he's playing for her. I'll link the video in the playlist so you can watch it afterward if you are so inclined. But this is a fixed action pattern. The female is the sign stimulus. They will do this mating dance, this very precise series of motions and this ritualized behavior, even if the female that you've put into the tank is frozen, even if she's dead. They will still do this series of behaviors. So there's another good example of where you have fixed action patterns, which kind of seem silly when you give them the sign stimulus out of context. Next, we're going to talk about a different type of behavior, and those are learned behaviors. But before we talk about learned behaviors, I feel like I should apologize for that jump scare earlier in the video, so this is my dog, Edward.
Here you go, Ed. What do you want to do with this? Digging a good hole?
Yes, that'll throw us off the scent.